Welcome everybody, thanks for tuning in. In this video, I'll cover the question whether or not BYD's supercharging is a game changer towards battery swapping or actually even makes it obsolete. So this question has come up during the live coverage of the earnings call that I've done, but I was actually really thinking of making a video on this topic anyway. So that's already a couple of days old of news that BYD announced that they have 1000 kilowatt chargers. After that, we actually got the announcement around CATL joining battery swapping with NIO in the partnership, which I also covered on the channel. So at least CATL seems to agree that 1000 kilowatt charging is not the end of battery swapping. Otherwise, they wouldn't do such an announcement, right? But today I wanna give you a couple of reasons to think through and points to think about this comparison between NIO and BYD or NIO and supercharging. If you look at NIO simply as a company who's doing battery swapping, or their car simply as being able to battery swap, I think that doesn't cover the whole picture. But this is what most people are looking at when they look at battery swapping. They just think this is a way of replenishing power and a way of doing it faster than what else is out there, right? And so what you see here is a Chinese meme that's been shared by netizens, and I've roughly translated that on X or Twitter some days ago. But I want to go through these points and also give you a couple of more commentary around that. So watch it till the very end. I hope it's very valuable for you. Please smash a like if you enjoy this video, and then let's go into that. It's a comparison between BYD supercharging on the left-hand side and NIO battery swapping. You could say it's 10C versus 24C technology. In China you always have this 5C, 10C type of abbreviation for hundreds of kilowatt of supercharging power that's going through the system. We know that the Tesla chargers go usually 250 up to 400 and so on, and then we've got a couple of companies like Zeekr and BYD now, but also Li Auto in the past, that have been experimenting with higher power for supercharging. So it's not new that we get this trend of more potent supercharging systems, and BYD is now the first to introduce this 1000 kilowatt chargers, although I think Huawei is also close to that. So you see, this space is evolving, but still we've got companies who have been very, very important for shaping supercharging, like Tesla, who are still mostly at lower speeds actually. And I think that's my personal opinion of driving EVs and so on. Current supercharging is mostly sufficient. I would say between 100 and 300 kilowatt is really, really enough power in order to have a stop somewhere, take a 20 minutes break, take a 30 minutes break, and be up to speed again back on the Autobahn, for example, on a long range trip. So I never felt that battery swapping is a solution really only for this being at speed back at the Autobahn, because yes, it's doing that, certainly, and it's doing that much, much quicker than everything else around today. But, it's, in my personal opinion, in my personal experience, in my use cases, I do 20 minutes breaks, and usually that gets me enough power again to being back on the road and have as much power as I need until the next stop or even my destination. But in some certain cases, like for example in Chinese cities, or if you're just a daily commuter and you really want to fill up your tank, fill up your battery again, then I could never imagine going to a destination charger, going to a supercharger somewhere, sitting in the car and wait for 40 to 60 minutes to actually get it filled up. That's really a very, very bad user experience, and that's for some people the case, depending a little bit of your life circumstances, like if you got your own house, if you got your slow charger, if you got a charger at your work, and so on. So and that's just the bigger context where I would say this race towards even higher power isn't maybe the cleverest thing to pursue in the first place, as the technology has really already come to a standard which is quite feasible for most cases, but not each of the cases yet. But maybe it doesn't need to fulfill each of the cases, right? So with this new technology, BYD claims that you could really gain 400 kilometers at 5 minutes, or even get your most of the batteries full in 5 minutes or less than 10 minutes, which is even at today's comparison slower than battery swapping, right? So it does solve some of the stuff, like becoming faster, but it's still, as of today, not as fast as the fastest NIO experience that you get. Now, this is always just an ideal scenario on top of that, right? For those 5 minutes and adding 400 kilometers, this will work if BYD, first of all, builds those superchargers everywhere, and second of all, if the grid can support them, right? If you are going to a swap station as of today, you know with a guarantee that you book your slot in your front screen of the car, and then you arrive at a battery swap station. It will take the 3-minute swap plus some waiting time, which you will see in your display, like if there is a queue in front of you or not. So you may actually choose your route or your order that you put in accordingly, right? So it's very, very predictable with NIO battery swapping, and that's not the case with a supercharger like that. And I'm worrying that this new technology by BYD is actually not making the average supercharger experience much better, in a sense that today's problem is rather not that you don't have the latest highest speed available, but rather whether or not the stall will be occupied or not, and whether you can secure it, whether you have to wait for other people to finish, or if your experience gets cut in half, basically, if you're supercharging and then there's another car coming next to you, and suddenly the whole station, drops in power because they don't have the power throughput to serve more than one car at a certain speed. So, with this 10C 1000 kilowatt charging, I'm not sure if BYD actually solves a real issue there, right? And they can not achieve something which NIO has here with this very, very standardized thing of predictability, of getting your slot, of getting the battery swap done in a certain amount of time. And there are more than 3,000 stations around. So it's not a hypothetical thing. It's not theoretically. It's not we want to get there in 5 to 10 years. It actually took NIO quite a few years to get there, right? But now it's the reality as of today that you get this experience, and it's there. And whether or not BYD fulfills it, I mean, if they do something like that, and announcing that they're going to build like 4,000 stations, that's a promise here, then I guess they will do that, because I think BYD is a company that's good at operations and following through. I don't doubt it, but I think it will take them some time, and I'm not sure where the real estate is for that sort of stations that can actually also be supported at what is needed in order to get this functionality done. So first of all, it's going to take them time. Second of all, we got other companies like Li Auto currently already cutting back on their goals. So initially, they also wanted to distribute, I think, 5,500 kilowatt, so 5C chargers. Also very, very advanced, very fast. Do you still hear about Li Auto Mega, which has a very, very good charging curve, and also very close to this, 5 to 10 minutes for a full battery? No, it's still, they're cutting back, first of all, on the targets from 5 to 4,000, and it's still an issue for them to go out there and build the stations, and it's nowhere near to the battery swap network that NIO has already deployed. And then again, it would still come with those problems. Then one more thing is that I'm actually doubting whether or not such kind of high performance charging stations are actually cheaper than to build than a battery swap station. I think BYD said in their announcements that they also would need battery packs, like something like something similar to a mega pack by Tesla. BYD does their own packs, need to be on site in order to support to make sure that the power is available, because the grid wouldn't handle, those fluctuations and swings. So they need to have a buffer in between. So it's actually putting battery packs there similar to what is in a battery swap station, only that it's not working in the same mechanism, that you get the standardization, and the battery swap station actually don't need a super high powered grid infrastructure in order to function. It's actually leaner, and also maybe in size even denser. So I'm putting my question marks and doubts out there whether or not this BYD infrastructure would actually be cheaper to build than a battery swap station, and that's been one of the main critics point for against battery swapping, hasn't it? Now, this tells me that where are the superior points of this approach, right? Other than the big numbers that they are throwing around here. And we've got even some question marks which we simply don't know yet, like how draining will this be on the battery actually. So it may actually work. Maybe they put it out there, maybe it works, maybe it will be satisfactory, but what will be the long-term effects on the batteries that are in the car and that cannot be swapped? So it will be quite expensive to replace them in case that there is much degradation. I don't know whether or not there will be, but it's an unknown, right? So this uncertainty is something which they still need to improve. And then user experience, I've talked about how you get the standardization with battery swapping, but with BYD, as of now, you still need to go out your car, plug it manually. With battery swapping, all you got to do is you still sit in the car. Actually, it doesn't matter if it's freezing outside, whether or not it's raining or not. You get this standardization, high level experience. Whereas we've seen those videos out there of people fighting for a gun for the charging in China during, for example, travel seasons and stuff. So yeah, BYD doesn't solve or doesn't guarantee a super great user experience, even though if the supercharging is becoming much, much faster. Nonetheless, it's taken so many years now since battery swapping is around, and this false narrative, in my opinion, that once faster charging is around, battery swapping will be obsolete. The fact is that battery swapping has also increased, and has never been increased in the speed, but has never been beaten by any of the fastest superchargers out there. And I think it will never be beaten, by the way, due to the fact that there are simply physical limitations on how fast you can load and unload a battery. So that's just the case. And so I would say that this advantage is not going to go away. But of course, I also think that supercharging will catch up in some of the the experience, in terms of the process will also get faster. But the problem is, really in the operations, in the reality, like how often will you have that as a reliable solution, and whether or not that may actually have some, bad effects, for example, on battery health and so on. And we're now only talking about one aspect of battery swapping, right? All we've been talking about is actually the charging experience, whereas there are big benefits to the whole battery swapping ecosystem. I think one of the major points why CATL has joined NIO, which is for one, on the business model side, that the battery packs are owned by the company, not by the user, which is really paying into the possibilities for revenue streams such as grid balancing, because it's an asset that the company is managing and is utilizing, and managing in terms of health, of depreciation, in terms of the economic value that's in there, and so on and so forth. So this is something, this physical separation between the vehicle and the battery, but also the financial separation between who's owning the battery, that, even if this 10C charger is around, battery swapping is only providing and not supercharging. At least that's my opinion. And, so these are announcements. We need to take them serious. I think BYD will execute on some of them, but the history largely proves us that in the last couple of years, there was no major breakthrough in the advancement of supercharging that would actually really kill this idea of that battery swapping is a additional way of replenishing power of your vehicle, right? I'm speaking like this because I think there are certain use cases where it just makes a lot of sense. For example, if you really need it fast, if you need a special experience, or if you are in a city and you cannot afford to spend 1 hour for queuing and sitting at the supercharger in order to replenish your car, if you have no other ways of recharging, like at your home or at your workplace, right? In those areas, I think battery swapping makes a lot of sense. And on top of that, you will have those ecosystem potentials. Whereas now, for example, now where we just got the latest release that NIO is launching a very big virtual power plant in Suzhou, where they are combining battery swap stations and we're balancing the grid and so on. So instead of putting strain on the grid and complicating the grid, making it more difficult to manage, battery swapping is actually a solution to the grid. And I'm hoping that we see more of that with CATL and NIO now in the future to really capture this opportunity and value of the ecosystem business model type of thing, where we can clearly see now, it's also a fight between CATL and BYD, for example, as battery makers, and the way that they're looking to realize that in the future. So I, for one, find battery swapping, because of what I just mentioned, very interesting and with potential. And I don't think such new technologies ever will put an end to the idea of battery swapping. What do you think? Thanks for watching and see you in my next videos.